The courtroom buzzed with tension as the verdict loomed. They branded him a criminal. She swore he was innocent. What unfolded next would leave every soul in that room breathless. "Mr. Calloway," the judge's voice cut through the silence, "your client needs a statement." But defense attorney Nathaniel Calloway merely snapped his briefcase shut, his jaw set like steel. "Your Honor, I withdraw from this case effective immediately." A collective gasp erupted, phones whipped out, and the crowd erupted into frantic murmurs. Yet in the third row, a tiny figure sat motionless. 9-year-old Lila Carter, her braids tied with mismatched ribbons and her oversized hand-me-down sweater swallowing her whole, went unnoticed until she stood. "I'll defend him." Her voice rang out clear as a bell. The room froze. Someone snorted. A bailiff hesitated, torn between escorting her out and humoring the spectacle. Judge Holloway, a woman known for her razor-sharp patience, leaned in. "And how, young lady, do you plan to do that?" Lila's hands trembled, but her voice didn't. "Because 2 years ago he pulled my big brother Jamal out of a burning car in Detroit when no one else stopped." The defendant tech prodigy Elijah Wright, once hailed as the Silicon Valley Saint, went pale. He'd forgotten that night, the smoke, the screams, the way the kid's shoelaces had been singed. But Lila hadn't. The reporters' pens hovered. The laughter died. Even the judge's skeptical glare softened. Then came the twist. Elijah's accuser, a slick-suited exec from his own board, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Layla spotted it the way his fingers dug into his briefcase, the sweat on his temple. "Funny," she added, tilting her head, "how the man who fired Mr. Wright's security team last month is now so sure he's guilty." The room erupted again, but this time the whispers had a new target. The truth, it seemed, had been hiding in plain sight, wrapped in ribbons, and a voice too brave to ignore. The camera lingered on Lila's face as the music swelled, her grin sharp enough to cut glass, her eyes alight with the kind of fire that doesn't come from age, but from knowing you're right. Behind her, Elijah's hand rested on her shoulder, his once polished CEO veneer replaced by something rougher, realer. The chyron at the bottom of the screen read, "The unlikely duo who exposed a system and built a better one." Then, just as the segment was about to fade to black, Lila leaned into the mic. "Oh, and Trevor." The studio hushed. "Malik's code left a back door in all your accounts. Sleep tight." The feed cut, but not before capturing Elijah's Jesus Christ whisper and the studio crew's collective gasp. 3 days later, Trevor Maddox's prison commissary account mysteriously donated every last dollar to the Lila Carter Memorial Coding Boot Camp. The transaction memo read, "Interest on stolen pizza money." L. Elijah texted Lila a single question mark. Her reply, what he owed us. At Malik's grave that spring, Lila placed 2 items beside the headstone, a Forbes cover featuring her and Elijah, and a USB drive loaded with every court document, news clip, and meme from the case. "Told you we'd win," she murmured, adjusting her future attorney general pin. The wind picked up, rustling the pages of her notebook where a fresh case waited, Operation Grandma May's landlord rents due jerk. Somewhere Malik was laughing, and somewhere else a million kids watched and started taking notes. Lila's fingers dug into the wooden bench, her tiny frame trembling, but her voice steady as a heartbeat. "I watched the security footage," she declared. 12 times. The man in that warehouse had a tattoo on his neck, a snake. Mr. Wright doesn't even have a piercing. The prosecutor rolled his eyes, but Judge Holloway silenced him with a raised hand. "Let her finish." Lila took a step forward, her sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. "You think I don't know what I'm talking about? My brother Jamal used to say the same thing right up until Mr. Wright got him into that coding boot camp. Now he's got a job at Google, or he would have if—" Her voice hitched just for a second. "If he hadn't been shot last year in a drive-by. Wrong place, wrong time. Just like Mr. Wright is now." The courtroom went so quiet you could hear the hum of the overhead lights. Elijah's cuffs clinked as he clenched his fists. He'd never met Jamal, not really just handed him a tablet at a charity event, but this kid remembered, and she was the only one fighting for him. Then came the twist no one expected. A phone buzzed, loud, obnoxious, from the prosecutor's table. The man fumbled to silence it, but not before Lila's sharp eyes caught the caller ID Chairman Driscoll, the same name stamped on the lawsuit against Elijah's company. "Funny," Lila muttered just loud enough for the front row to hear, "how the guy trying to lock him up is getting calls from the man who owns the warehouse." The prosecutor turned beet red. The judge's eyebrows shot up, and somewhere in the back a reporter dropped their coffee. 2 hours earlier, Lila had been sitting on the floor of her grandma's apartment in Chicago's South Side watching the trial on a cracked phone screen. Grandma May snored in her recliner, the scent of last night's collard greens clinging to the air. Lila had stuffed her backpack with printouts, police reports, news clippings, even a grainy screenshot of that snake tattoo. She'd known deep in her bones that Elijah Wright was being framed, just like she knew the real criminals wore suits, not handcuffs. Now, as the judge called for recess, the bailiff hesitated. "Kid, you got any adult here?" Lila jutted her chin out. "I don't need one. Truth's got no age limit." The gallery erupted, half laughter, half applause. Elijah finally found his voice. "Why are you doing this?" he whispered. Lila met his gaze, her eyes older than her years. "Because when the system's broken sometimes, the only one left to fix it is a kid with nothing left to lose." And just like that, the trial of the decade became the revolution no one saw coming. Lila had spent every afternoon for the last month hunched over a library computer in Chicago's South Side, scrolling through court documents until her eyes burned. Not because anyone asked her to, because the world had already written Elijah Wright off as another rich guy who flew too close to the sun. But she knew better. She remembered the way her brother Malik's face lit up when he got accepted into Elijah's tech mentorship program. For the first time, someone had looked at a kid from the projects and said, "You matter." Then 3 months later, Malik was gone, caught in the crossfire of a gang, shooting he had nothing to do with. The funeral was closed. Casket. Lila didn't cry. She researched. Now, in the courthouse's stuffy waiting room, a social worker tapped her pen impatiently. "Honey, we need to reach your guardian." Lila didn't flinch. "My grandma's phone dies when she forgets to charge it. Try again in an hour." The woman sighed, but before she could argue, the door swung open. There stood Elijah, his tailored suit wrinkled, his cuffed wrists resting on the table between them like a confession. "You're real," he breathed, as if he'd half convinced himself she was a hallucination. Lila met his gaze. "So are you. And so's the truth." Then came the moment that changed everything. One of the deputy's radios crackled to life. "All units be advised, Driscoll just lawyered up. Says he's cooperating." Elijah's head snapped up. Lila didn't miss the way his jaw tightened. "Who's Driscoll?" she asked innocently. The deputies exchanged glances. Elijah let out a bitter laugh. "The guy who owns the warehouse I supposedly robbed. Funny how he's suddenly cooperating after a 9-year-old outsmarts his entire legal team." Lila's notebook fell open to a highlighted page, a news article about Driscoll's shady real estate deals. She'd circled one line in red: "Tenants reported missing security footage the night of the alleged break-in." Elijah's eyes locked onto it. For the first time since his arrest, something like hope flickered in them. "You're not just some kid, are you?" he whispered. Lila shrugged. "Nope. I'm the kid who's about to prove you're innocent." Outside, the buzz of reporters grew louder. The storm was coming. And for once, the little girl with the braids and the backpack full of truth was the only one holding an umbrella. Funny, she thought how the people they ignore always see the most. Elijah had built his empire from scraps, literally. At 15, he'd salvaged that busted laptop from a dumpster behind his high school, taught himself to code by watching pirated tutorials, and by 19, he'd launched LinkUp, an app that connected homeless teens with shelters and job training. The press ate it up, the Silicon Valley Saint, they called him. But now they'd traded halos for handcuffs. The irony wasn't lost on him. The same system that loved rags-to-riches stories also loved watching them burn. Lila flipped to a page in her notebook, her finger tapping a circled name, Victor Hale. "This guy's your victim. Right funny thing, he sued you 6 months ago over some patent, then dropped the case 2 weeks before the fire." Elijah stiffened. He hadn't even noticed that detail. "How'd you—" "Public records." She cut him off like it was obvious. Then she dropped the bomb. Also, his near-fatal injuries. The hospital discharged him in 48 hours. The deputy coughed, suddenly very interested in his shoes. Outside, the hallway erupted into chaos, shouting the clatter of cameras. Someone yelled, "Driscoll's flipping. He's naming names." Lila didn't blink. "Told you it was a setup." Elijah's cuffs rattled as he leaned forward. "Why are you doing this?" For the first time, her voice wavered. "Because Malik believed in you, and I believe in him." The raw honesty of it hit Elijah like a punch. Here he was a grown man with every resource outmaneuvered at every turn, and a fourth grader with a spiral notebook had uncovered more in a week than his 500-an-hour legal team had in months. Then came the twist no one expected. The door burst open. A red-faced prosecutor stormed in, shoving a document at the deputy. "New evidence. Security footage from a gas station 20 miles from the warehouse, time-stamped the night of the attack. Shows Wright buying a Slurpee at the exact minute Hale was supposedly getting beaten." He glared at Lila like she'd personally offended him. And somehow this kid already knew about it. Lila just smiled sweetly. "Told you I did my homework." Elijah's laugh was half relief, half disbelief. The deputy uncuffed him with a muttered, "This is some Matlock shit." Outside, the crowd's roar swelled, cameras flashing, reporters tripping over themselves to spin the new narrative. But Elijah only had eyes for the little girl in the faded denim jacket, her notebook now clutched like a trophy. "You realize you just saved my life, right?" Lila shrugged. "Nah, I just gave the truth a microphone." And with that, she marched out past the gawking lawyers, the stunned jury, and straight into the spotlight where the real story was finally beginning. The courtroom air crackled with tension as Lila stood in the center, her notebook trembling slightly in her hands, but her voice steady as a judge's gavel. "And here's the thing," she continued, flipping a page with the precision of a seasoned attorney. "That eyewitness who swore they saw Mr. Wright, his name's Carl Meeks? Funny story, he's got 3 prior arrests for perjury." The gasps were louder this time. Even the stenographer paused mid-sentence. "Oh, and also," Lila added, tapping her chin like she'd just remembered, "he works security for Driscoll's properties." Weird, right? The prosecutor shot up like his chair was electrified. "Your Honor, this is outrageous." "Sit down, counselor." Judge Holloway snapped, her eyes never leaving Lila. "Miss Carter, do you have proof of this?" Lila beelined to the bailiff, handed him her phone, and, with the dramatic flair of a late-night courtroom drama, played a voicemail. "Hey, Carl, it's Driscoll. Change your story or you're fired. And remember who pays your kid's tuition." The timestamp, the day after the arrest. Eli's mouth fell open. He'd never heard that recording, never seen that phone. Where the hell had a 9-year-old gotten? Then it hit him. Malik. Lila's brother had been in the mentorship program, the one that taught coding and ethical hacking. The judge's gavel silenced the uproar. "We're adjourning for the day. Someone get me every file on Carl Meeks and Driscoll's financials by morning." As the crowd erupted, Lila turned to Eli, her grin smug. "Told you math don't lie." But the real twist came next. As reporters swarmed, a hulking man in a too-tight suit, shoved through Victor Hale himself, bandages long-gone face twisted in fury. "This is bullshit," he roared, jabbing a finger at Eli. "You think some kid in a voicemail clear you I saw you that night?" Lila didn't flinch. "Cool story. Then why'd your near-fatal injuries heal in 2 days?" She whipped out a hospital discharge form. "Also, your Uber receipt shows you were at a casino that night. Want to explain that?" Victor paled. The room went dead silent. Eli finally found his voice. "Your Honor, I'd like to move for dismissal." And for the first time in his life, the Silicon Valley saint watched justice unfold. Not in a boardroom or a bank, but in the fierce, unshakable glare of a little girl who'd turned the system inside out. Outside, the cameras flashed like lightning. Lila adjusted her backpack, leaned toward Eli, and whispered, "Next time, maybe don't trust a guy named Victor Hale." Sounds fake as hell. The revolution, it seemed, came in braids and Velcro sneakers. The TV flickered with Lila's face. "Local girl exposes flaws in Brixley case," as Grandma May finally sank onto the couch, her knees popping. "Child, you realize you just poked a hornet's nest, right?" Lila didn't answer. She was too busy staring at the black SUV, still idling outside their apartment, its headlights off. Then the knock came. Not the polite tap-tap of a neighbor. This was the kind of knock that made the door rattle. May's hand flew to her chest. "Lord Jesus!" Lila marched to the window, yanked the curtain aside, and came face to face with a man in a security uniform. Carl Meeks, the same eyewitness she'd just exposed in court. His smile was all teeth. "Hey, kid, we need to talk." May grabbed Lila's arm. "Don't you dare open that—" Too late. Lila threw the door open, her chin jutting out. "What, you here to threaten me?" On camera. She pointed to the phone she'd duct-taped to the ceiling earlier, live streaming to her brother's old Twitter account. Carl's smile vanished. Click. Down the hall, Elijah's lawyer, who'd been conveniently visiting a client in the building, stepped in to view phone recording. "Mr. Meeks, fancy meeting you here." Carl backed up so fast he tripped over a trash can. The SUV peeled away before he could even scramble inside. May slammed the door, whirling on Lila. "You set that up?" Lila shrugged. "Malik always said if they're dirty, make 'em sweat." Elijah's lawyer, Miss Rivera, let out a disbelieving laugh. "Kid, you've got a future in witness intimidation. Legal witness intimidation," she added quickly. But the real kicker came an hour later when the news broke Carl Meeks arrested attempting to flee state border. The charge, witness tampering. And in his trunk, a duffel bag stuffed with cash, Driscoll's cash. Lila smirked at the TV. "Told you math don't lie." Then softer. "Malik would have loved this." May pulled her close, shaking her head. "Your brother is loving this. Probably up there giving God a play-by-play. Outside, the SUV was gone. But the revolution, it was just getting started. The jail door clanged shut behind Elijah, the sound echoing like a death knell. Trevor's confession played on a loop in his mind. It was me. The same guy who'd crashed on his couch after getting fired, who he'd trusted with his company's back-end code, who'd stood at Malik's funeral pretending to give a damn. Now he was Hale's puppet, pulling strings to bury him. Elijah's fist slammed into the cinderblock wall. Pain shot up his arm, but he barely felt it. That's when the guard cleared his throat. Brixley? Your lawyer's here." Again. Miss Rivera stormed in, her heels clicking like gunfire. "We got a break. Carl Meeks just flipped, says Trevor paid him to ID you." She shoved a tablet in his face security footage of Trevor handing Carl an envelope outside Driscoll's office. But here's the kicker: Hale didn't even know. This was all Trevor's play to get control of Linkbridge. Elijah's laugh was hollow. "So what, Trevor's word against mine?" "Not quite." Rivera's grin turned razor sharp. Your tiny savior had one more trick. Lila sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor, Malik's old laptop humming as she scrolled through lines of code. Grandma May hovered in the doorway, arms crossed. "Child, it's 3 a.m. Almost got it," Lila muttered. Then bingo. The screen flashed, "Admin access granted." Trevor's entire iCloud spilled open emails, texts, a video of him bragging to Hale about framing Elijah. May's hand flew to her mouth. "Lord have mercy, how'd you—" "Malik's back door." Lila's voice cracked. He put it in Trevor's phone last year when Trevor kept forgetting to pay interns." She hit send just as the bedroom window shattered. Glass rained down. A rock thudded onto the floor wrapped in a note. "Stop digging, or Grandma's next." Lila didn't scream, didn't cry. She just picked up the rock, weighed it in her palm, and looked at May. "Call Ms. Rivera. Tell her we got everything." Dawn broke over the courthouse as Elijah walked in uncuffed to a media circus. Reporters shouted questions about treason and betrayal. But his eyes locked onto Lila, perched on the steps with a donut in one hand and Malik's laptop in the other. "You hacked Trevor," Elijah whispered. Lila took a bite. "Nah, Malik did. I just pressed play." Behind them, the news blared. "Trevor Maddox arrested at airport with one-way ticket to Belize." Elijah knelt eye level with her. "I don't know how to thank you." Lila wiped sugar off her mouth. "Easy. Keep helping kids like Malik. And get me a real lawyer badge, not the plastic kind." As the crowd erupted around them, Elijah did something he hadn't done since he was that broke kid in Bakersfield. He believed in justice and second chances, and in the fierce, unbreakable power of a little girl with a laptop and a grudge against liars. The headline wrote itself, "The Saint, the Spy, and the Fourth Grader Who Toppled an Empire." And somewhere Malik was definitely giving God a high five. The recess stretched into an eternity. Lila sat on the courthouse steps, her notebook clutched to her chest like a shield, while reporters circled like vultures. "Kid, how'd you even find those emails?" one shouted. Lila just shrugged. "Public records. And maybe a little help from my brother's hacker friends." The truth was simpler. Malik had left a trail of breadcrumbs in his old coding forums, and she'd followed them straight to Trevor's digital doorstep. Inside, Elijah paced, the holding room chains rattling. Ms. Rivera burst in her face, flushed. "We got him. Judge just signed a warrant for Trevor's arrest, and Hale's being brought in for questioning." Elijah's knees nearly buckled. "How?" "Because your pint-sized Perry Mason found something we missed." She tossed a file on the table, a screenshot of Trevor's Venmo transactions. $5,000 to Carl Meeks the day after the attack. Memo forgetfulness tax. Elijah's laugh was raw. That little savage. But across town, Trevor Maddox wasn't laughing. He stood in a dim parking garage, slamming his fist into a steering wheel. His burner phone buzzed with a text, "They know, get out now." Too late. The garage lights flickered on, flooding his car with light. Police cruisers boxed him in. Then bang, not a gunshot. The sound of Lila's sneakers hitting concrete as she stepped out from behind a pillar, Grandma May and two cops flanking her. "Hey, Traitor Trevor," she called, her voice echoing. "Malik always said you were trash at covering your tracks." Trevor's face twisted. "You little—" "Save it." Miss Rivera strode forward, warrant in hand. "The adults will take it from here." Back in court, Judge Holloway didn't even bother with the gavel. She just stared at the now empty defense table where the prosecutor had been sitting. "Case dismissed." The words sent the room into pandemonium. Elijah turned to Lila, who was already packing her notebook into her backpack like it was just another school day. "You knew they'd catch him at that garage," he said. Lila zipped her bag with finality. "Nah, I just knew he'd run exactly where Malik said he would when things went south, same spot he hid, after stealing pizza money from the dorms." She paused. "Old habits die hard, I guess." As they walked out, cameras flashing, Elijah looked down at her. "What now?" Lila adjusted her straps. "Now you go fix your company, and I go finish 4th grade." She glanced at the news vans. After my 60 Minutes interview, the revolution, it turned out, didn't need a billionaire or a lawyer, just a girl with a notebook and a dead brother's revenge list. The fried chicken grease still shimmered on Lila's fingers when the knock came 3 sharp raps that made Grandma May's spoon clatter into her collard greens. Elijah froze mid-bite. "You expecting company?" May wiped her hands, scowling. At this hour, she yanked the door open, ready to cuss out a salesman, but stopped cold. A woman in a crisp pantsuit stood there, a leather briefcase in one hand and a 60 Minutes microphone in the other. "Ms. Carter, I'm Diane Sawyer. We'd like to offer Lila a spot on our Young Voices Changing America special." Lila didn't even blink. "How much?" Elijah choked on his sweet tea. May's jaw dropped. Diane Sawyer laughed. "Well, you are Malik's sister." 2 weeks later, Lila sat on national TV, her braids swinging as she deadpanned into the camera, "Trevor Maddox, oh, he's exactly as dumb as he looks." The studio audience lost it. Viral clip 3. Backstage, Elijah scrolled through his phone. Link Bridges' stock had tripled. Hale was under investigation, and Lila for president was trending. He nudged Lila's shoulder. "Kid, you realize you're famous, right?" She shrugged, scribbling in her notebook. "Fame's boring. I'm working on my next case." Elijah peeked over her shoulder. The page read, "Operation Free Lunch for Every Kid in Chicago." That night, as Elijah walked Lila and May to their car, a shadow detached itself from the alley. Trevor Maddox out on bail, his designer suit, rumpled eyes, bloodshot. "This isn't over, Brixley," he spat. Before Elijah could react, Lila stepped forward, her voice icy. "Actually, it is." She held up her phone, playing Trevor's brand new confession recorded that afternoon, bragging to a buddy about how he'd played the system. Trevor lunged just as 2 cops materialized, cuffs ready. "Thanks for the evidence, Mr. Maddox," one said cheerfully. As they hauled him away, Lila turned to Elijah. "Pro tip: always check for hidden mics." She tapped her necklace, a tiny, glittering FBI junior agent badge Malik had given her last birthday. Elijah burst out laughing. The sound startled him, light, unfiltered, free. 6 months later, the Lila and Elijah Act passed Congress guaranteeing tech access for every underfunded school in America. At the signing ceremony, Lila elbowed Elijah. "Told you I'd make a good lawyer." He ruffled her braids. "Kid, you're not a lawyer. You're a force of nature." And as the cameras flashed, capturing the grin they shared, one scruffy billionaire and one tiny girl who'd turned justice into an art form, the world finally learned the real lesson. Sometimes the mightiest sword is a notebook, a dead brother's legacy, and the unshakable nerve of a 4th grader who refuses to blink.